everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of Beyond the Thread, Conversations in Context. I'm your host, Brian Harlan Brooks. This is Jamal Story and Darrell J. Hunt. We are here about, what are we talking about today? What's our title tonight, Darrell? Why don't you tell us?
Real change versus symbolic change.
And discussing Facebook Live boycotts. It's quite a bit going on.
Wow.
Let's just jump right into it. So we've been talking a lot. All of us have been going through these changes in the world, COVID-19, Donald Trump, quarantine, and Black Lives Matter, Pride Month. All this has been going on. And there's been a lot of people that want to jump forward and say, we're going to make changes. Corporations that have traditionally had racist policies and have been traditionally all white male owned are trying to make forward-facing statements about their intentions. I don't know about you guys. I get a little exhausted because I'm like, what's different now? What's changed? I know for a fact the only change that is different right now is that everybody is home and the revenue has stopped. I know that if the revenue was continuing, a few sad tears, and we would move right on to the next. But now it's stopped, and we have COVID-19, and we have the scourge that we have in the White House, and the administration that follows, and the entire Republican Party that's in lockstep. It's caused everybody to really pause. I think it's a good thing. I was talking to a friend of mine recently who said he thinks it's a spiritual moment overall, that the planet Earth, then Mother, Father Earth said, you know what, just stop for a minute.
Right.
Just stop. But with that said, corporations are making outreach and trying to change, as well as the fact that there are a lot of things that are coming down. We see a lot of statues coming down. The Mississippi flag came down. A lot
people
of things. Say, Darrell?
People are upset in Mississippi.
They are angry in Mississippi.
We have NASCAR. Darrell, we lost you for a second. We have NASCAR.
Sorry.
It's okay. We have NASCAR with the noose with Bubba and people walking in solidarity around the track. And then the FBI reporting that there were ropes in all the garages and it was not a noose. Now, Bubba came back out and said it was exactly a noose. I know the difference. So yes, let's get into it. Let's talk about the change that we see. Jamal, you put a little presentation for us today together. I'm excited.
I did. Okay, so we're talking about statues, real change versus symbolic change, right? And so one of the things I wanted to do was sort of, put together something that gave us a sense of just some visuals of kind of what's going on. Because one of the things that that we talked about earlier, Ryan and I talked about this, I think Darrell and I talked about this too in separate conversations, this idea of sort of the history of these statues and sort of, and the history of symbols of Confederacy and of oppression and white supremacy in this country, and sort of how all of that plays its part and in keeping the narrative, really, really loose and very, very specifically white supremacist. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can see this little ditty we're putting together here.
Technology.
This is Albert Pike, and this was in DC. They burned this one, and they changed it and yanked it down. Charles Lynn, this was in Birmingham. We just talked about how angry. This was also a Confederate who used some Native Americans. I'm going to say, I'm saying Native Americans, but Indians, because of course, that's what they call the natives here, Indians, used them to sort of fight in that war. And I believe that that's the one who ultimately was accused of treason on both sides, both the Confederate side and the United States side. And then Andrew Jackson eventually gave him a pardon, and then he became a KKK leader, which is what you do. And then this is a whipping post, Georgetown. You can see on the right side of your screen, it's gone. And this stood for a long time. And then that takes us to John Smith. This is in Jamestown. As you can see, he's very high up there. I'm going to pause it right here. And John Smith, of course, is the person in the turn of the century, coming from the 16th century to the 17th century. This was the person who came over and interfaced with the Powhatan Indians, and had the moment with Pocahontas, who is coming up next. Now, Pocahontas is also in Jamestown. but you can see she's much smaller, and she is nowhere even close to in the vicinity of John Smith. Okay, and I'm not sure how many of you guys know the real story of Pocahontas, but the basic story is, let me actually go back so we can see her for a second. Let's just see her on the screen. Pocahontas, she was probably 22 or 23 when she died, and she was maybe 13 or 14, somewhere around there. She's definitely a teenager when she met John Smith. And the whole thing was, you know, they kidnapped John Smith and they dragged him over to do something that he perceived as very, very threatening to his survival. And she, you know, the story goes that he put his head down on the rock, and then she came over and put her head there in between, you know, the rock that was going to come down and his head, and saved his life. And then apparently after that, the chief said, "Welcome, my son." Now, because John Smith obviously didn't know how they did things.
Oh, hold on. So the story goes that John Smith allegedly was kidnapped by indigenous people.
Yes.
Who were going to kill him, and then Pocahontas.
He thought.
Well,
because he didn't know the traditions and the mores of this particular culture, so he assumed that was what was going to happen. The part of the story that's odd is that then right after Pocahontas saved his life, the response was, "Welcome, my son." I don't know that was really a ritual to kill him, but anyway, carry on.
And who told this story? Where's this story being told? Who's the author of this? Is it Pocahontas? Is it the indigenous?
Well, it was definitely not Pocahontas. I mean, we've gotten a better version of this story more recently. You know, I mean, even the history channel, the history page, all of those pages are telling a version of it that sounds more authentic, because of course, you know, as it always happens with indigenous people who are helping strangers, you know, they were going through it. They were having a difficult time dealing with the environment they were in. They were going hungry. They were losing foods. They threatened the Powhatan group. John Smith and his people threatened to take them down. And so, you know, in an act of benevolence, the chief said, you know, why don't we meet and have some negotiations? The negotiations didn't go well. I can't imagine why. And so, you know, naturally, the natives thought, you know, this isn't going to go well. Let's launch an attack on them and make sure that they don't do anything crazy. And of course, Pocahontas saved him John Smith by letting him know, oh, this is what's about to happen to you. So he was rescued once again. And then of course, she married another native who then was kidnapped by other English settlers and then taken across to the motherland. Which in this case, of course, is England. And what was really fascinating to me about this entire story is that none of that narrative, none of that whole narrative of sort of benevolence and you know, second chances and all of that stuff that the natives were giving John Smith, none of that is present in any of this sort of symbolic representation as far as statues in Jamestown. And one of the things we talked about is sort of the idea of how to tell the story. What story exactly?
Do you want to come on out of Pocahontas?
I'm going to come out of Pocahontas.
Thank you, darling.
Listen, I don't know why you guys are tired of looking at her.
There we go. Well, I think what's interesting about everything that you just said was that the narrative, this is one of the few times that we see two sides in terms of put up an effigy in the town square, so to speak. So we have Pocahontas up and we have John Smith. Problem being, John Smith, like Thomas Jefferson, is alleged to have an affair with somebody that had no real choice. And when we get to that, and we have those statues in Jamestown that are now coming down. And the statues all over the country are coming down. And although I think it's time the statues come down, I think one of the issues that I have with the statues coming down is not that they shouldn't, is that that's just a surface moment. Right?
Yeah.
And people have been upset about the statues. And one of the things that's been interesting to me about the way people are approaching it is they're like, these statues, how can they take these statues down? And my answer to that has been, these statues have sat for generations. And nobody has really addressed taking them down, because we know as Black people, as BIPOC people, that the statues are symbolic. Right? But apparently, especially because Donald Trump just passed a bill that would make defaming a statue something like 10 years in jail. He wants to do that. I don't know if he really can do that. They're more concerned with the statues and the symbols than the people that are actually alive and being killed unjustly. So the statues have to come down at this point because apparently, as my grandmama used to say, y'all think fat meat ain't greasy. We told y'all we don't want these. We told y'all, listen, we would like to live with unfettered. And you said no. We asked nicely and you said no. We gave you Martin Luther King and you said no. We gave you Malcolm X and you said no. We gave you Colin Kaepernick on a knee and you said no. And all the while, Black people are being killed with impunity, oftentimes legally such, and oftentimes illegally, but then held up by the law nonetheless. And so at this point, you've left us with no other option. Go ahead, Darrell.
And this is my thing. From day one, I have said, some people think that the statue should be melted down and no. I believe they should all be curated. I believe they should all be in museums so everybody can know who these nasty, filthy, racist, nationalists, they didn't know who these people are because taking down the statue without contextualizing what you're doing or without nuance basically keeps people angry, it keeps them upset. All these rebbish people that love the Confederacy, who love tradition and stuff like that. I would love it if the statues were taken down, if spaces were made in museums so that people can walk by and say, this person sold slaves, this person supported the Confederacy, this person. I think they should be kept, and I think they should be moved inside of these museums. They should be taken like in certain places so people can learn from them, because just destroying them, melting them down, tossing them into the sea, that is further sanitizing our nation's history. So that's my thing about the statues.
It's also how I feel about burning the word nigger. I think nigger is part of the lexicon that was created that built the country. I think it just has to be contextualized all the time. I don't want it to be something that people can use against me, but the real issue is getting rid of the circumstances that create a nigger, if you will, in the society. Getting rid of the circumstances of poverty and disproportionate assault by the police and the inability to create longevity and wealth, the inability to have health and wellness in our communities. Getting rid of all of that, getting rid of stereotypes and monolithic one story about Black skin and Black people should be first. And then I don't even think they should censor the word nigger because it's a part of the entire culture. What happens is we are offended by it and we know that it can still be hurled at us. And conversely, I think white people who have moved on, believe they've moved on past it, don't want to hear it because it reminds them. And I think the truth is both of the stories have to be told in full. So sure, George Washington, first president, helped to create the system in which we know. That's an honor. He also owned over 100 slaves. Both things have to be said so that we can understand that our founding fathers are not deities. They are not gods. They don't represent.
Right.
Darrell, you're from the South. So what was it like growing up under the specter of the Confederate flag with a lot of these symbols around you?
I don't ever remember any type of positive energy around the flag when people in my family, in my community saw them. I grew up knowing that there were certain neighborhoods we were not going to drive through late at night. I knew what it was to see a Ford F-150 with a gun rack and a Confederate flag hanging in the back. I knew what it meant if someone had the Confederate flag around the cover to the gas, that little flap there. I always knew that it did not equate to me being safe. I always knew that it was going to be a certain type of white person stepping out of that truck. And this is my lived experience. I'm not making this up. But what I learned was that, there are other white people who will not hang this flag from their front porch. They will not put it in the back of their truck, but they feel the same way. So what they do with their suits in legislative offices is like they keep that same energy going. But the flag, those people celebrated it. I mean, it was more important to them than the American flag. In many neighborhoods I rode by, there was only the Confederate flag hanging. Some people have the Confederate flag and then the American flag and say, well, it's history. But no, there were houses that we would ride by and we say, ooh, they only got the Confederate flag. We know not to knock on their door. So that was the overall energy around seeing the flag, like plain view daylight. You hope you don't see it on a road late night and you got a flat tire.
Well, the irony of the Confederate flag has always been to me, because I grew up in the Northeast. The irony of the Confederate flag that's always funny to me is that it's oxymoronic to this idea of nationalism, right? The national love, that we love the United States and we love this country. Well, that's a treasonous flag. That is actually the only thing that really has been treasonous in terms of an organization against the United States. It was antithetical to forming the United States of America. It wanted to separate because it wanted to maintain slaves. And so I always found it so ironic that people said, oh, it's about history. I mean, I have a cousin in my family who grew up in the South, and he had a lot of white friends, and we argued like cats and dogs one day because he told me, oh, it was just a symbol, it didn't mean anything. And it, to the point where I had to go in my mother's library, pulling out books, telling him what it was. It took us from midnight till 3 a.m. for him to really get it, that it's not just a symbol. And that because people treat you kindly while that flag is up, does not mean they think kindly of you in your humanity.
And that is the power and the danger of proximity. Because you're around some of those people and they've treated you nice at dinner, you take that as the entire moment or the entire experience. That's why growing up, I learned a lot of stuff early. Some of it I probably should not have learned before I got to kindergarten, like the story of Emmett Till. Maybe I should have got that around fifth grade, 10 years old.
Well, I'm saying that it's so interesting because, I don't know if you all seen this video of the little girl who's marching and she's yelling and she's walking down the street and she's pointed 5. And a lot of people posted that and were loving it. And I felt so sad that she had to be marching for her existence under the age of 10.
And she also had to be in a potentially violent environment. A lot of people are not understanding that once you join a protest, a march, and you're standing up and speaking truth to power, you are making yourself a potential target. There is no way my under 10-year-old child would have been out marching like that with a bullhorn for people to be able to spot her immediately. No way.
Well, not to belabor the point earlier that we made about sort of both things, about sort of all, this thing that's come up in other conversations, and I'm sure we'll have on this show, but about all of the things can be true. The idea that it's not just one thing, that America is sort of fascinated with the glorification of this good bad dichotomy, sort of like the superhero villain thing, that you're only one or the other. If we exalt you, we've got to exalt you, and there can be no evil, or you're evil and then there can be nothing redeeming about you whatsoever. And so with our heroes, that's part of the thing with all of these symbols. All of these symbols are about sort of creating either a good evil paradigm, and it doesn't really allow space for the entire history to be told, so that that little girl is growing up in a context of truth, that is permeating her environment at home, permeating her environment educationally or scholastically. She is getting a sense of the truth, whatever aspect of that she's able to handle at 5 years old. But the thing is, what doesn't happen is at 11 or 12, now, if you go over here on February in this after school program, because it's predominantly in a predominantly Black area, we're going to now give you a little bit more history that you're not going to get anywhere else, about all the things, all the contributions that came out of Black people as far as invention because of our, enslavement. And all of those were solutions to problems that we needed to solve, that we ultimately solved for the betterment of the entire nation in perpetuity, right? So it's the idea that if we can reconcile all of that, then that 5-year-old girl walking down the street in that march, even if she doesn't have the entire context, it's not gonna hit her so hard, later on. Or at that moment when, parents sit their kids down to have the talk. It's not the birds and the bees talk, of course. It's listen, if you get pulled over by a cop, this is what you do. Calm down. This is how you address it. Move slowly. Nothing sudden. Because all of these are of course, life-saving things that we have to tell our children, right? So the idea is that if we can create a broader more honest context, more inclusive, something that's more comprehensive as far as the history of the country and the history of that statue and the history of this one over here and what happened between there, then we won't have this problem.
Well, and you know, getting back to our topic, discussing, you know, sustainable change, you know, it's so interesting when the taxes came down and all of a sudden Juneteenth became a thing for the whole nation. I was a bit offended and triggered by it. I was at work and my manager and I had a good conversation because one of the things I said was, you know, I think all these symbols coming down is good. If we get rid of Aunt Jemima, get rid of Uncle Ben, that works, that's fine. Give Juneteenth as a holiday, that's fine. But that is not what the matter at hand ever. And that is not going to, that's not going to suffice for actual substantive real change. Because as far as companies making forward-facing statements when there's no inward-facing reflection of that in their corporations is also problematic. I think it's great to have no Aunt Jemima, but when you get rid of all the symbols of racism, it becomes what we have in the Northeast, as opposed to what you went through, Darrell, or in the West Coast. You get covert racism. Because now Aunt Jemima, did not know the pancake brand knew exactly what that symbol was. That symbol came from a slave, and then went on and they gave her a perm in the 80s and changed her facial features and changed the way she looked. And Uncle Ben came from the same thing. So those companies are still going to be rooted in that exact behavior. It's going to take them erasing the picture because the truth of the matter is the one companies, and I understand this, wanting to look good on the external is about their money. It's about a revenue today. And right now, it's very unpopular to be overtly racist. So I'm going to change these symbols. I'm going to take this down. Half of the reason NASCAR said no Confederate flag was not because they cared about Bubba, which was the only person driving a Capitol that's Black. It's because all of those corporations decided to pull out of NASCAR. So but the reason I'm always with the sidest of eyes is because, excuse me, y'all didn't hear about Martin Luther King? Y'all just, I just want more education. Black History Month is not just for me. That's a national holiday. So Martin Luther King's birthday is a national holiday. So for you to all of a sudden be walking in solidarity with Bubba around the track as if you had no idea, and I think another one of the side eyes is we know that white people that carry the Confederate flag know exactly what it means. They might not see it in the company, but in a homogenous zone where you see the Confederate flag, there's no way you couldn't know what that meant at NASCAR. And now that the Confederate flag has been banned, I don't believe that those people that are going to go to NASCAR are going to change their minds, or that NASCAR is necessarily going to stop courting racist institutions. What do you want to say, Darrell?
Without information, you don't understand the strength of an institution like NASCAR. NASCAR was born out of bootlegging. NASCAR was born out of prohibition because the people that were selling hooch and slinging liquor illegally had to soup up their car engines so they could outrun the police. Right. So that is what NASCAR is rooted in.
And I'm going to pause you right there, Darrell. Which conversely, if we want to make a one-to-one comparison, so we know that when we do drag racing, when Black people in Black neighborhoods take their motorcycles or bikes and do that same thing, they are immediately criminalized and immediately considered dangerous. And I'm not saying the practice is not dangerous to private communities. I am suggesting that I'm showing the double standard between the two things. NASCAR, with people doing something illegally to run hooch, becomes a multi-billion-dollar institution in the United States and in the South, where Black and brown people who soup up their hoopties in West Hollywood or in Compton, and who have lowriders in brown communities and who have long Cadillacs in Detroit are considered hood and ignorant when NASCAR becomes a multi-million-dollar thing. Go ahead, Darrell.
Yeah, and what I was home a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking to my mother about things that are going on, and because Hey, Shea. And because I'm filtering trauma, I can't look at a lot of news. I look at New York One in the morning to see what's going on with New York, Are we on phase 2? How are we moving forward? What is the weather today? But I can't look at other news because I don't want to risk something flashing in front of my face that is going to trigger me because there's so much stuff going on. So as I'm in North Carolina, I'm talking to my mother, and she said one of the major things, and I was looking on their local news, people are mad because the governor is not supporting opening NASCAR. So y'all in a state that's currently increasing in numbers of COVID cases, y'all are mad because y'all good old boy, good old girl, Dukes of Hazzard, good time, y'all want to gather and sit packed up in stadiums to watch cars go around a circle. That's more important than protecting the lives of the people that are disproportionately affected by COVID, which is the Blacks.
Or your own. And I think that one of the things that's interesting is disproportionate doesn't mean that you're immune, right? Because that goes for the whole system, right? So if we go back to taking down all these statues, you know, Cuomo, as well as he's done with COVID-19, was like, well, Columbus was a symbol for the Italian American community. I'm like, well, the Italian community maybe because I'm not an American, and Columbus didn't land in what we call America, North America at all. And to those statues, definitely, I think they need to come down. And I think I'm glad for Aunt Jemima being off the box. So what I was saying earlier is that is not substantive change.
No.
All of us on here have come from Black institutions, Black art institutions, Black education institutions, and Black art community. Substantive change is the long haul. It's the long. It does not happen overnight. It doesn't happen because you erase something. It doesn't happen because you put out a Facebook post. It doesn't happen because you put out an IG post or because you hired a Black diversity inclusion person on your team. And what's ironic is you have the diversity inclusion person Black. That's not the person that has to be Black, right? No. That person doesn't have to be Black or brown. It helps. But if you have a corporation that is majority white or majority white male, you need someone also who speaks that majority language to understand how that's going through. And then people have to be hired in other places within leadership in that community to create true diversity that runs through the entire organization.
And with understanding the history of human behavior, I feel now, I want everybody to have a job, but I really want my people to have a job. Now, if it's a nice coin and they want to hire a brother or sister to be the director versus whatever, or whoever's going to work with the director, they need to be of color. But I often support that person being white because of the way that white people are educated, as Jane Elliott has been highlighting for decades. Because of the way that white people have been educated and because of the way that they've existed in this nation, anytime we start talking, a wall goes up. Anytime we speak above a whisper, the wall goes up. That's why for the longest time, I have sent people, Jane Elliott, when I have been talking about certain subjects, I send her to white folks. And Dr. D'Angelo, I can never remember her first name. Let me look her up.
Jane Elliott, everybody, I'm not sure how many of you guys saw the study that was done years ago involving the dolls.
Yes.
Where there was an experiment to see what racial biases are sort of deep-seated culturally, and what biases are sort of, they pop out in experiments like these. And there was, you know, the brown doll and then the blonde doll.
No, that wasn't Jane.
Jane Elliott did. No, Jane Elliott did the blue-eyed experiment, and she did
brown eye. Wasn't that with the dolls?
No.
That experiment was done, as I recall, it was done on television. It was where they asked children, they asked little Black girls, which doll is the good doll? Which doll is the bad doll? Jane Elliott, when Dr. King was assassinated, she decided to try with her students in her classroom to reverse the general treatment of Blacks versus white, but she did it around eye color so that people could see that they were being discriminated.
Blue and brown eyes.
Yeah, they were being discriminated based on something they could not control. We can't control our eye color as we're born. So that's why I sent her. And I've also started sending people Robin DiAngelo's study. Her book is called White Fragility. I think that's the title of her book.
You got it.
And so because a lot of people, I can be very nice and very sweet and very peaceful and very angelic.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
And people, and sometimes, sometimes white people still think I'm coming with daggers and lighter fluid and matches when I'm basically just saying, no, this is what happened. So as we're looking at real change versus symbolic change, there's a lot of work that has to go into actually rerouting everything. If you're going to take down the statue, but you're not going to put the truth of the information back in the school books, and if you're not going to talk to curriculum specialists about U.S. history and how students at a certain age start learning state history, like you get, like, we got North Carolina state history throughout, school at certain levels, and then you had U.S. history. If you're not going to redo that, then what's the point of having this symbol? And we have to be the people to challenge that. Really quickly, I was on Facebook one day and somebody tagged me in a post about a book that had printed misinformation about the sit-in movement. And because people know who I am, they know where I'm from, I used to work at the museum that was the actual Woolworth. I went to A&T. I know the whole story front to back. So I got on the thread and people were talking. The information that was incorrect, the author who teaches is at UNC Charlotte, he wrote, and the Duke University Press published, that the sit-ins in Greensboro started in 1964, and they were led by students at UNCG. The sit-ins were February 1, 1960, and of course it was students from North Carolina A&T. UNCG is a white school. Yeah, they're diverse and they're liberal arts and everything, but it's a white school. So all of the people on the thread were talking about, what, see how they do us? They do us so bad. They got to mess up our history. I said, well, look, it's published by the Duke University Press. Have any of you called them? And they said, no. I said, hold on. I Googled Duke University Press, called the person at the front desk. Hi, Duke University. I said, hi, I need to talk to you about some misinformation that you all have published. Had that conversation. I told them I would get back with them. I went back to the thread. You guys, I just called Duke University Press. Here's the number so you can express what you're typing out on this thread. You can do the work of calling them, and maybe they'll speed up in the reprint of the book that was being used in the university classroom setting.
Did they?
It's a lot of work.
Well, did they change it?
I have to call them back to see, because they would have to take the book out of circulation, because from my understanding, the book was being used in the university setting. So then that would mean syllabus, course for crime, all that kind of stuff.
Yes, it's a textbook, basically.
Right. Yeah. So, but I'm saying they would have to work out what they're going to use the next semester. Are we going to, stuff like that. So I do have to call them back, but I just wanted to show the people that they have a voice and that there is work to be done versus just arguing and clamoring and making noise and letting out your emotions.
I think a lot of that, because we have not had a historically contextualized education in the United States for a very long time, and because we want to tell a single story, right? Eddie Glaude, who teaches at Princeton, he has a new book out. I love
him.
He's fantastic. He's always coughed if you see him on MSN. But
it's always together.
It's always down. I'm like, how does he do that every day? The glasses. I mean, I tried.
I don't know how anybody does that every day.
And he does it at 7 a.m. But he was discussing how his new book out. I'm going to pull it up in a minute to put it out so everybody can see what the book is. But he was discussing the other morning about how he thinks it's very poignant that the King Memorial faces the Lincoln Memorial. Faces the Jefferson Memorial in DC. Right, and it's telling. He says he always sees it as pulling, as King telling Jefferson, "Come on forward." Like that wasn't enough. And the thing is, we can have statues if they are contextualized. I do not think we should have Confederate statues anywhere ever at any point except a museum. Yeah, I think that because we're all three of us are artists and we can all speak to this, but when you put a piece of art up, you are inevitably exalting it without context. Whether or not people may not read the placard on something, you look at it, they feel it, it's important, it's there. And when you put it in the town square and you put it up there, it's a specific art direction that's happening with that piece of work. It is not just simply a statue that sits there that's a part of history and a contextualized idea that's showing both sides of it. It is saying this is what we stand for. If I take a statue of my mother and put it on the front of this house, it's saying to everybody, this is what we stand for. And it would give the impression that everybody walking by that this was somebody worth knowing and knowing and honoring. And to do that, decontextualize is really problematic. And I think that we have to make sure that that our history is contextualized with both sides of the story, so that we're not erased from it. We can't have Rushmore and have that up there carved into a mountain and say these people are almost gods, while those gods own my people. So when those people own my people, then we can't have them be perfect. And that is why it is so affronting when we start telling our history, I think, for a lot of white people or people who believe, because you don't have to be white to be a white supremacist, just so everybody's clear.
Right.
So those people hold.
Yeah, those things don't have to go together.
So those people that hold white supremacy at a premium and nationalism as a premium, when we start telling our story, they're immediately insulted because what they want is the perfection of their history so they can wave their flag without any second thought, so that we can have what holiday is tomorrow without any second thought.
Mm-hmm. Case in point.
I was just going to ask. I was going to ask how that plays its part in sort of the, I want to say irrevocable, but that sounds so hopeless, structure of America as far as capitalism.
It ain't hopeless.
Slavery.
I don't think it's hopeless. It's all together, right? So the reality is that's what it is. So whether we tell the truth about it or not, it still exists. It's like getting a COVID-19 test.
Oh, no. What I mean by that, let me reframe the question. What I mean by that is that if we tell it like it is and we all understand this is what it is, and then part of that history is the building of this country on Black backs. That's just what it is, right? And the idea of, and sort of the Protestant work ethic and all of those puritanical things that happened at the very beginning when people first got here, and tried to incorporate those values into something that turns into the pursuit of success at all costs, including yours over there, you Latino, yours over there, you Negro, yours over there, you know what I mean? All of those things. What I'm saying is once we get to that truth, once we get to this is what it is, and also, by the way, we're still doing it right now, even in our corporate structures all the way down. That's the part that seems hopeless to me. I don't know if it's fair to say that it's irrevocable, because of course, you know, here we are in 2020 and now we're after change. But I'm just saying that the entire thing is built around that kind of racist, oppressive hierarchy.
Well, I don't think it's irrevocable. I don't struggle with hopelessness for people, but what I do say is that because it's baked into the cake, so to speak. So all of the things that we think are success, you know, one of the things, my mission is to get people to redefine success for themselves. Most importantly, brown people and people of color, is to redefine success so that you don't keep running up a hill that has nothing but shit on the other side once you get to the top of that hill, right?
Sure.
So move from the spirit of enough, so that once you know what enough is for you, it's not just more and more and more. Because if it's always more and more and more and more and more, you are always going to be at the hest of someone else telling you what's important and what isn't. And you won't be able to make those choices, and you won't be able to make those sacrifices that it takes to really love another person and put somebody else first, or to say, I'm not going to take that job because it's a show about women and I think it should be a woman choreographer. If I move from the spirit of enough, then I can do that. If I never have it, then I'm going to take every job coming my way. And so I think, Jamal, to your question, I think that, yes, it's baked into the cake, but I think the only way to get out of the bake into the cake is to really say, hey, this is what started it, right? This is what started it. Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson were not, I'm never going to acknowledge that as a love story, because one and one didn't, right? So I can't hear you, Jamal, you're on mute. You're on mute, Jamal.
Sorry about that. You didn't have a choice.
You did not have a choice. So when you don't have choice, there can be nothing that we can acknowledge as love. But if we tell that story honestly, then what we tell everyone is that you have the power for incredible good and incredible bad, which makes our checks and balances worthwhile. I think one of the reasons the system does not work is because the mission of people who want to see us not win in it is to make us apathetic and disconnected from it. So make us believe that with 14% of the population or 20%, under 20% of the population, that we can all get guns and we can have our own communities. We tried that. We had Wall Street. We had the MOVE movement. We had that. And what happens is we are set upon by the larger thing that we are in. We are a part of it. And then we're not, and until we actually extradite ourselves from it, we cannot extradite ourselves from it while using it. Right. So I can't.
That's the paradox. We're using it. We're still a part of it. We are still part of the consumer population.
But I mean, but we have to be. It's funny that you mentioned Jefferson and Sally Hemings. I was talking to a friend earlier this week, and she mentioned she sent me an article about, it was like more information about the history of Sally Hemings and stuff like that. And a lot of what was in that article, I knew because X amount of years ago, I was in DC, and whenever I'm in DC, I'm going to the Smithsonian's, at least 2 of them. So I was in the Museum of American History, and they had a complete exhibit on Jefferson and Hemings. And the thing that I heard the most out of the white people that were walking through that exhibit, they were saying, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know that." And then they moved to something else. "Oh my, wait, they had how many children? I didn't know that." And then they were like, "Oh my God, they weren't freed until he died. Oh, so he enslaved his own children." And I wasn't saying anything. I was letting them babies soak that in and perish, because that's what I felt like someone was doing. But when people get the truth, it demystifies these founding fathers, and it makes the work easier. People are allowed to see them as human beings. One of the things that is powerful about art is its ability to be attached to public memory. Hamilton, the show, is a result of art and public memory. I attended a conference some years ago about art and public memory, and Susan Lloyd Parks was speaking because she's done so much work around Lincoln. And she was talking about how we don't even recognize that we're drawn to stories simply if someone uses a founding father as a central character, a celebrity as a central character. And people going in because of that misty public memory or whatever, going in, they're already attached and they're engaged. There's a documentary I encourage everybody to watch before they watch 13th. It's called Slavery by Another Name. And I'm going to point out one thing. There's a woman who was always told that her great-great-grandfather, whichever one of them greats he was a hardworking man, a noble man. He helped, he got wealth for the family, all this kind of stuff like that. But when they rolled open the history books for Mother, they found out that after the Emancipation Proclamation, he had about 20 slaves that were still on his property. He owned them. They were still working. And when the officers came to take them away, he shot all of them. She broke down crying on camera when they gave her the information. That is the work that has to be done. Cry, wail, get your feelings hurt, find out the truth about your racist granddaddy, find out the truth about your racist grandmama, because we always want to prop up and present a lot of times the white female as the peaceful, docile member of the family and stuff like that. And white women are often made the heads of diversity and inclusion because they are women, so therefore they are a minority. And going back to what Jamal says, it's not impossible, the work, but it is daunting. It is exhausting. But we just got to keep taking deep breaths.
And like I will continue to say, as my friend Dion Figgins and I came up with, if everybody would just put your pedal to the metal at a 40 mile an hour when it comes to do it, and just do it all the time. Stay on 40 all the time. About knowing your history, about being present to the language you use, about paying attention to what's happening for people as we start to evolve. If everybody does that much of it, we'll make some moving, and we won't have to, because really, I want everybody to know that all of us as Black people are sitting around, I should say, I can't speak for all of us. A lot of us are sitting around at these symbolic gestures saying, okay, great. I knew Aunt Jemima was racist. I didn't need, you took it down, thank you. I knew that, but thank you. I prefer Juneteenth when it was a celebration that was not gonna potentially have a t-shirt made by a white man. I don't know, you both are too young to remember this, but we had this thing, troop jackets, that were very popular in the 80s. And we used to wear troop, and he used to say troop on the back. And it came to find out that there was an anti-Black organization that was making those jackets. And at least that was the rumor. I should vet that thoroughly, but that was the rumor.
I heard that too. I never got confirmation on it, but I did hear that.
Heard that about the 8-ball
long after it was.
I heard that about the 8-ball jackets too that were very popular.
Not the 8-ball.
The 8-balls. Now I don't know if that's true, but what's more important than it being true or not to me is that it's extremely possible. It is extremely possible that an organization who hates you because of capitalism can sell you something that you think exalts you. It's like the Black Lives Matter t-shirts that you want to pick up, or the bootleg Janet Jackson concert t-shirts that you want to pick up. You don't know who is selling that.
Yeah, my mother, she texted me a few weeks ago. She said, where should I get a Black Lives Matter t-shirt? I said, from a Black owned and operated business, or a business that is giving a certain amount of proceeds to an organization once you purchase, that t-shirt. And that's where we're talking about real change versus symbolic change. Okay, y'all done took Aunt Jemima off the box. How many millions are y'all giving to a foundation to help support organizations like Black Lives Matter, or to help or to help give money to fund investigations to see about the deaths of Black trans women? Honey, again, I think it was Otis from the Temptations on their Unsung. He said the proof of the pudding is in the eating.
Absolutely.
What are you're at the table? What are you preparing to serve people, to give people? And are you going to be the first partaker in the work that has to be done? I don't care. Aunt Jemima can stay up on that box for as long as the company stay open. If y'all give $50 million a year to an organization, I don't particularly care. I make my pancakes from scratch anyway. It ain't but flour, baking powder, some sugar, whatever. I'm not going to buy that box of mix. I don't do that. But it's not enough to take her off the box, because what that does is that tells white people, ooh, now I can buy Aunt Jemima because there's nothing offensive and I don't want to be attached.
But action to action, like Netflix giving $100 million to Black banks, like to actual, that's action. Granted, they also put $100 million into owning Friends, but whatever, the TV show. But if you have $100 million, you need to. That's action. That's actually a doing.
And before we move on, there was a wonderful opinion article in the New York Times by a woman by Caroline Randall Williams. And the title of the article is as follows: "You want a Confederate monument? My body is a Confederate monument."
Oh yeah.
The first paragraph, and that's all I'm going to give you. "I have rape-colored skin. My light brown Blackness is a living testament to the rules, the practices, and the causes of the Old South." So I suggest everybody go to the New York Times. Her name is, again, Caroline Randall Williams. She wrote a poignant article about how our bodies are monuments. If you would really get out of your own way, the fact that Black people are able to thrive at all is a celebration of the United States, right? So if you want, the only reason the country is able to call itself, an argument can be made that the only reason the country is able to call itself a civilized nation and a first world nation is because Black people refused to be enslaved. Had Black people not refused to be enslaved, and white people not work to make that change as well, but had Black people not refused to be enslaved, we might still be a third world country with owning slaves. We might very much be. Not that slavery has been abolished, because the prison industrial complex is that in another name. But the three of us certainly sitting here is a testament to the ability of Black people pushing the system forward. Jamal, we lost there.
He's screen sharing the article.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Everybody see that?
And there's her name at the very bottom.
Absolutely.
And I also am going to find and give it to you, Jamal, so that you can post it. There was an article some time ago, maybe a couple years ago or something. It was about how slavery changed the molecular structure of the African. Growing up as a little boy, I remember asking my mother, I had to be like 5, I think it was before kindergarten. I remember asking my mother, is grandma your mother? Because Ollie is I mean, she just got kind of down to what we call light skin because she was translucent when she was younger.
Not translucent. She made it. She graduated to light skin from translucent.
Yeah, she was 89 on the 1st. So she just celebrated her birthday. She answered the phone and I started singing her birthday. She said, "Thank you. Who is this singing now?" I said, "It's Wilchie, your youngest Grace."
Sorry, what's the name?
Wilchie. That's my nickname. My grandma gave me
How did we get from Darrell to Wilchie?
My grandma said I looked like a little Wilch when she first saw me, so she named me Wilchie. My mama called me Newt. My mama called me Newt. That's my Instagram. My grandma called me Wilch. So if we ever go to North Greensboro and somebody called me Wilchie, they've known me since I was a kid and they know all my business.
We all have a good friend whose name I won't mention, but his nickname is Pickle. But I'm gonna leave it at that.
but the article literally talked about how we look, the way we look for the most part. And as I look back, I remember when I started to recognize where I'm from, a lot of women that were really light were married to men that were really dark. Mm-hmm. And I remember my grandmother saying she wanted her children to be brown.
Mm-hmm.
So there are so many things that people don't think about. Like you said, when you and Dion said, keep it on 40.
Right.
So that your adrenal glands ain't wore out. So
right.
that you ain't broke down crying. And take you a little bit of information one day at a time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I think so in closing this section of it, I think that we've come to the conclusion that of course we want substantive change over a symbolic change. The symbols are nice, but it's just like I don't know, to be morbid about it, if you have an infection in your body and you cut off the boil on the top, the infection has to be taken out from the root. And if the infection of racism is not taken out from the root, it doesn't matter. You can have all the exfoliation you want in the world. If you got COVID-19 in your lungs, it's not going to matter. You got to get it out of your lungs. You got to get it out of your body. And the effect of systemic structural racism, which again, I want to say to anybody who hears me, white supremacy is bad for white people. Patriarchy is bad for men. Mm-hmm. Homophobia is bad for heterosexual identified people. If we all ain't well, none of us are well. And now, just in the last thing I wanted to touch on tonight was one of Jamal brought to my attention and really made it part of tonight's conversation, which was the Facebook boycott, because that goes back to trying to extradite yourself from something. Now, I've thought it was funny all along when Congress and everybody was pulling Mark Zuckerberg up on Capitol Hill to admonish him for all of his poor business practices, while they could not get the president of the United States to follow suit in those same practices. However, and then I also thought it was equally, somewhat darkly humorous that people so vehemently talk about white supremacy and the structures thereof and talk about how bad Mark Zuckerberg is while we all stay on the platform. So here we are doing this show tonight on the platform, but Mark Zuckerberg has decided that he's not going to take certain ads down and he's not going to take other things down. So there's been a boycott to the tune of, what is it now, like $70 billion? Well,
what it is that there's $70 billion in ad revenue that come to Facebook on a regular basis, 530 by now, that count might be up higher. 530 big companies or companies in general have pulled their advertisements from Facebook. Part of the thing is that actually only 100 companies, I think they're only a percentage, maybe of the top 100 companies, the big ones like Target and Chipotle, and there's obviously a disparity between Chipotle and Target, but Lululemon, all of these companies that actually create that ad revenue, only I think $4.2 billion of it comes from those companies. The majority of that $70 billion comes from smaller companies, smaller ad purchases by, much lighter and, very, very scarcely known companies in America. So that's part of the big thing is will this ad boycott make any huge dent in the bottom line for Facebook. If it drops the stock 7%, that they will have done something big, maybe. But
well, and when you start talking about billions of dollars, right? So if somebody says to you, Jamal, you're not going to make that quarter tomorrow, you'll be like, okay. And so when you talk about somebody who's making billions of dollars, I think that the boycotting and the pulling out of it is important, but I don't think that it's actually going to be sustainable or make substantive change in the platform. I think Mark Zuckerberg's purview is that this is not a publishing platform, that this is a platform for public speaking. So when people speak publicly, they're allowed to do what they want to do. But as Darrell J. Hunt can testify to, he's been put in Facebook jail at least 8 billion times. So there are times in which we are all censored. So it's very interesting that the powers that be the president, be an administration, be it something on the white side or the right side of the law, doesn't oftentimes seem to be censored. But if it's a brown terrorist act, of course it's censored. If it's something that they consider to be pornographic based on their rules of pornography, it's taken down. If it's something I know that people were calling Terry Crews coon and things were taken down because of that. And I'm not convinced that many people even know the history of the word coon, honestly.
No, true.
But people were taken down for that. So I mean, where are we? I mean, maybe we'll find
part of it. That's where I was going earlier. That's part of the tie-in for me to the conversation that we were having earlier. Is the bigger issue when discussing hope, right? When I'm discussing hope and the idea of the bigger system, it becomes about a conversation about how much, to what extent does the capitalistic way of being filter down into all of this history and all of this oppression and all of this racism. The idea is that, there's obviously a dollar bill, there's a bottom line oriented aspect of all of this, but then there's also one of the folks suggested on MSNBC, I think it was earlier, that a lot of the companies are utilizing this moment of boycott to stand firmly against the hate speech and rhetoric that is used on Facebook and Twitter, which is owned by Facebook. Twitter and Snapchat are both Facebook engines, but by the president. So it becomes political. It becomes an act of political warfare too for a lot of the companies that are pulling out. And then there are a lot of companies. One of the things we talked about too before, Joel and Brian, is this sort of what, and I know that we're not using this term anymore, but for shorthand, the race to wokeness, so to speak. The idea that these companies are wanting to show as much as possible how quickly they can progress to the finish line, if there is one, of the revitalization of some kind of understanding of and appreciation for Black people in this country. So all of that is part of the conversation with, in other words, for me anyway, and I'm saying this to the general audience because this is specifically my opinion. For me, all of it is very, very connected. The fact that we are having a conversation about Facebook and also understanding too the conundrum that Mark Zuckerberg finds himself in as a person having to navigate free speech and free press and all of that in the context of a war against white supremacy, conflated, and I mean that very deliberately, with the money part of it, because there's a very, very clear financial portion of it that he may not actually be very affected by, but also the stain of how are you allowing these things to be said on your platform? All of that becomes part of the conversation about how, in the general scheme of success in business, if the scaffold for corporate success is already contaminated with better than youism and racism and hierarchies and social stratification and economic stratification, and it's all about more money, then is there a way? Is there a way to get through that? What is the solution? I mean, how desperately do we need to dismantle, or does it need to be dismantled?
Well, it depends on who you are, wouldn't it, Darrell?
My thing is the hashtag Stop Hate for Profit, where these businesses are saying they're not going to advertise on Facebook and stuff like that because they won't take down Zuckerberg and the Facebook entities, whoever the people is in them rooms that make the decisions. They won't take down his stuff. For me, I think, okay, and as I was reading today, Starbucks spent over $90 million last year in advertisements on Facebook. That was the report that I read today. Mm-hmm. So you have stayed afloat. You're still doing quite well. So I kind of see that as like, I have disposable income, so I'm going to do recreational things, like go see the shake dancers and throw money at them. Then when I turn my life around and I say, no, I don't want to do that anymore.
When was that? Has that happened?
Are you?
This is all hypothetically hypothetical.
Hypothetical, Jamal. It's hypothetical.
Yeah, it's hypothetically hypothetical.
Okay.
So if I decide I'm not going to do that anymore, the disposable income or the money that I have did not disappear. It did not go away. Mm-hmm. So I think $90+ million Starbucks, are you going to give that or a portion of that to an organization, start a foundation, give it to the United Negro College Fund, give it to whoever? Statistically, Andrew Carnegie built a total of 2,509 libraries between 1883 and 1829. In 1929. I'm reading this stuff right now. 1,600 of them were in the U.S., 660 in the UK and Ireland, 125 in Canada, others in Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, Serbia, Belgium, France, the Caribbean, Mauritius, Malaysia, and Fiji. This was what the Carnegie money did. Now, all of his peers, Rockefeller, Morgan, all of them, they were disgusting people as they became, today they would be the equivalent of billionaires. But what they did at the end, they did their own little I'm better than you, because they were racing to see who could give more money as major philanthropists.
Yes.
Now, I don't want to hash whether or not that was valid, but I do appreciate the libraries that Andrew Carnegie built in New York that I have been able to visit. Mm-hmm. So I don't care. I don't ever have to be invited to dinner for any exec at Starbucks, but I would appreciate the year moving forward. So that's $90 million you're not going to spend on Facebook. Where that money going to go? Is it going to go to bonuses for the execs?
A lot of the companies that you mentioned earlier, some of them don't advertise, period. I think that like, I know that Lulu and a couple of other ones that you mentioned, they don't advertise on Facebook. They don't advertise, period. And they don't advertise on Facebook.
Lululemon does advertise on either Facebook or Instagram. I'm told that Instagram and WhatsApp are also owned by Facebook. So by extension, if Lululemon advertises on Instagram, then they're advertising on Facebook.
Absolutely.
Yes, Lululemon has a like page on Facebook.
Yes, but I'm suggesting that.
But you're saying running ads.
Right. Right, which is different.
But from what when they put up the master sort of sheet, I want to say I saw Walmart on there, I saw Chipotle on there, I saw Lululemon, I saw Target, I saw Starbucks that they were there at one point.
All those corporations pulled out.
By the way, I just want to say this. I got this quote. What Mark Zuckerberg said is, we're not going to change our policies or approach on anything because of a threat to a small percentage of our revenue, or to any percent of our revenue.
Because Mark got,
my guess is that all these advertisers will be back on the platform soon enough.
So it's the same response that Medgar Evers was given by white business people in his hometown. They said, we don't need your nigga business, go on, when he mentioned a boycott. And that's why I like to tell some Black people who think that you can amass enough wealth and have power, because when it gets down to it, the money does not matter if it's Black money. Bob Johnson's wife did an interview some years ago. She said, we are certified billionaires. Mm-hmm. We sit in rooms where people don't even see us. She said, I've been in environments and spaces where I knew everybody's net worth in the room and I was on the top, but none of them cared because I was Black.
Right. Well, the thing about it is, and that goes down to, I mean, I think all of what we're saying is, at the end of the day, the substantive things that you do have to mean something to you. So if you're going, I think to all of our points, Jamal, I don't think you can extradite yourself from the capitalist system.
Right. I agree. I absolutely agree.
Unless you're gonna be off the grid and grow your own food.
Which is where the hopeless part is. That's where I get bleak, because I go, there's no way unless you stop participating in it.
But here's what I think you can do. I think truth is the part that we need to be at, right? So the truth is there's gonna be good and bad no matter where you are. If everything blinked tomorrow and there was no more racism, sexism, homophobia, there'd still be bad people trying to do bad things to people.
Sure.
Yes.
The things that you participate in, are you participating in them mindfully? And are you making mindful choices about how long you're going to stay? Right. Mm-hmm. So if you do something that you feel like, okay, I'm here because I don't have a lot of choices. When you get a choice, do you make another choice? Do you take $20 billion of your $200 billion and give it to? Do you do that? Do you do 40%? Right. If we say 40 miles an hour, do we 40 miles an hour as a corporation?
Mm-hmm.
If a corporation like Starbucks did 40 miles an hour in civic responsibility, the world will be much better, right? If all the multi-billion-dollar corporations did 40 miles an hour, pedal to the metal in philanthropy, we would have more libraries. If everybody did 40 miles an hour in civic duty, we would make sure that our elections were not just happening when it was a presidential one, right?
If the companies that advertise, celebrate, and promote pride and support for the LGBTQIA plus community, if they can give just a quarter of a coin on that to Black issues, to issues of brown people, to issues that will fight socioeconomic division and prosecutorial discretion, all those kind of things like that. If they can start a fund for Black people that want to be attorneys to pay,
or if you want to give Dr. Reverend Barbara's Poor People's Campaign, or you want to help Stacey Abrams with maintaining the vote. If you want to do it, if you give as much money as, if you say, okay, I'm going to take, if we take the idea
of brown people too.
Yeah, if we take the issue, if we take that and do that, I think we make incremental change and we start to move the orb to make a different shape. But the orb, what'd you say, Jamal?
Oh, no, go ahead.
But the orb doesn't change if we only do it and then sit down. Do it and then sit down. As I said multiple times on this show, the nature of peace is to relax. And the thing is, we need peaceful warriors, right, who protect the peace, right? So in an Africanist culture, in indigenous culture, there are warriors that protect the peace of the people. I mean, the idea was stolen for the police. The police are supposed to be peace officers. If police be peace officers, we'd be in a better place. At this point, guys, I want to turn the conversation to questions. Jamal, do we have some questions on the floor?
Yeah, there's one. I just sent one.
Read it to me.
Okay. What are your thoughts on advertisers boycotting social media platforms? And do you think it's enough, or should users boycott social media platforms as well to effectively apply pressure to affect change in their policies, in the company policies?
Well, I don't think it's ever enough until things actually change, right? So I think companies boycotting, as Mark Zuckerberg knows, is unsustainable for most of those companies, right? So as we move away from television, 4 channels, when I was growing up, you had 2 to 13, you had to in that place, right? Now, then we had advertise in that place. And now that we have all of the choice that you have, you need to advertise somewhere. And because you're not making the same revenue from doing network advertising, and a lot of the streaming things, if you pay enough premium for it, you don't get advertising on it either. I think it's not going to be sustainable for a lot of organizations to not advertise on Facebook, which is what Mark Zuckerberg knows. And I'm a little bit loath to discuss the average person boycotting, although I think it matters. I think it's just like, they say, don't use plastic straws, don't use single-use plastic bottles. The truth of the matter is, the emissions that are coming from the meat industry are putting more methane gas into the atmosphere than all the plastic straws combined. So then I'm always a little bit against, I think the individual can make shifts, but I think the responsibility being on the individual, while corporations who get protections like they're individual are let off the hook doesn't make any sense to me. I go into the store, I don't buy a single-use plastic bottle. They're not less on the shelf.
Mm-hmm. Let me tell you, for me, social media platforms are all that many of us have. I've said it 100 times. If I had sponsorship, if I had a company backing me that would pay my bills and buy my salmon from week to week, I would be all over America talking. I would be at demonstrations. I would be, but I can't do that. So right now, these are my outlets. This is what, all this is free. So this is what I'm going to use. Now, the people who want to post fight videos off World Star, people who want to just do all kind of bull crap via social media, I don't care if they boycott. But people with strong, specific voices, I think they should stay on social media platforms. I don't think they should do this symbolic. Well, I'm just not gonna use my voice. I'm not gonna stay connected with people. I remember is it Yara Shahidi, the young actress? She said millennials catch a lot of flack about being on our phones and being on our devices. She said, but at least we're having conversations about change. She said, this is the medium of current technology. She said, we don't have to spend time going from one cork board at a store to trees and light posts up, hanging up posters. We can talk immediately. We can gather immediately. The march that happened Saturday to support Black trans people, that was pulled together in about 4 days. Mm-hmm. Because of the strength of technology and posting and stuff like that. The march on Sunday for Black trans lives was pulled together through social media, through Instagram, through Facebook.
We absolutely at some point have to that point, I mean, because there's obviously a lot to unpack as far as the value of social media. And then also to when you talk specifically to that point specifically about sort of having the conversations on social media, on Instagram, and there's a whole other abyss that we can fall into on just that. And so that I think that's definitely show worthy at some point, particularly because it does become a generational thing. It does become about how the reason, I mean, this is called Beyond the Thread because it's important to have this kind of conversation, at least in this way, so that we can truly get into the nooks and crannies of it.
And to be clear, I think that, and I think in conclusion to that idea, I think the idea is that I think it's a combination of both. I think generally, there's been such a generational divide because technology went so quickly. So it didn't allow older people to catch up to it as quickly. And then some people were born into it. So some of us I was born without a cell phone. I didn't have a cell phone for my whole teen years. I had a pager. Went through that whole time period. But there are people that are older than me that it took them longer to get connected. While young people, my little cousins, were born in it and that's all they know. And I think one of the things that I wanted to create with this show was a space where we had substantive conversation that combined the worlds, right? So we're not just having quick quips and cutting off each other and reading each other and rolling our necks and moving on with the latest thing. We're able to delve in and take questions. And eventually we'll be pulling, everybody out there should know, we'll be pulling some of the conversations we've had on these threads and asking you to come onto the show to talk about what your opinion was.
And there's a distinction too to be made between having the conversations on the thread and then using the thread to mobilize a movement. You know what I mean? I'm seeing a lot of comments that I agree with in this thread on our show about the idea how so much movement has happened with millennials and then Generation Zers in terms of stopping the Trump rally and in terms of sort of
absolutely
all of that is absolutely for sure. And saying that there are a lot of different uses for social media, and this is part of the Darrell.
We lost you. Okay.
I know you lost me for me because my computer was going to die and I didn't want it all to shut down because I didn't have the computer charged.
Well, no, you know, I'm using my phone, so she was just letting me know she got 20%, but I can just grab my charge when it gets low. Keep going.
Okay, we're almost through anyway. What I wanted to say is that it's really important that I think it's a combination of all of it. I know I can borderline on sounding a little too naive here or kumbaya-ish, as it will be, but if I think that it's a combination of generations, and I think that's been an Africanist principle, it's been an African American principle. It's been principles that I've grown up with, where you learn from the past and you go to the future. So I think that you take the lessons that you learned, and you keep unpacking them and growing. Right. And I don't want people to have to start from the ground up. I want the next generation to stand on my shoulders. You know, I stand on other shoulders, and I want that to be the case. So I think it's a combination. I think we could do these quick rallies where we come together very quickly, but I think also door to door is what's missing.
Yes.
I think what made Donald Trump popular is he gave the illusion that he was going door to door, that he was going to a community and speaking to people that would not be spoken to. Now, we all know that Donald Trump hates only a poor white person more than he hates a poor Black person. He cannot stand his own supporters. He doesn't like them. He doesn't think anything about them. He would never even shake their hands. When he knows about social distancing, because he'd be 75 million feet away from them before COVID-19. Trust and believe. He ain't held not one of their babies. You know how politicians held old babies? Donald ain't held not one baby at a rally.
I've never seen that.
No.
So and watching too much, so there's that.
And the thing is, grassroots has always been the way. If you study the civil rights movement, it was the men and the women, but mostly the women, who were working behind the scenes at the local churches, at the local community centers, teaching people civics, breaking down the Constitution, letting people know this is when you need to go vote, getting buses and vans and carpools and stuff together to organize things. So a lot of people just get focused on the leaders and the warriors, which white supremacy they were able to target and destroy, but they don't know all of the information and the history about the grassroots work that got people gathered. They started blowing up churches because that's where people gathered. 16th Street Baptist Church was not just sporadically bombed. They bombed it because that was the meeting, that was the epicenter of all of the civil rights activity in Birmingham. So
I'm so glad you're there, Darrell, because one of the things I wanted to point out is that throughout history, Black people have gathered in churches to galvanize our community. And even if they were not Christian, those churches provided shelters, which is why the United States wants to make such a big deal about not being tax exempt if you do any political rallies. But I want to show you how white supremacy works. Trump just had a rally in a church, and they are going to maintain they're going to maintain their, and they advertised it as such. But I bet you that white church will maintain its tax exempt status.
The only way they could lose it is if they had an affiliation with like the Ku Klux Klan, and they allowed a Klan member to speak in their podium at their church and spread their hateful rhetoric. That's the only way they can get around it. They can have the president because he has not been declared and listed as a hate group. So your 501c3 status comes into question when there is someone that's listed as a hate group. They're speaking.
No, but your 501c3 also comes into question if you do political things in your church.
Yes, but we have to dive into, is the pastor saying you should vote for Trump, or is Trump saying I would love your support?
Right.
Because there's it's that snake oil salesman stuff.
It's very dicey.
I can guarantee you this: if because Barack Obama went to his old church to speak, right? So that happens, right? So it happens. But what I noticed is that a lot of Black churches are no longer doing the home of the movement, no longer being the home of the movement. No. And I am, if I know our system,
Edgar Evers and King and all of those leaders, the church was the way. That was how it got done.
The way, because they were in there just preaching about the gospel of the Bible. They were talking about civics, taking care of yourself, eating well, how to be safe. That's how they got ready for the Woolworths counter march in the base.
But what has happened over time is that we got some rights, we got some freedoms, and people started saying, well, we ain't got to do that no more. You know, that was the civil rights movement. That was the 60s. We have come up. We can vote. My children are going to college. my grandbaby's on the honor roll, so they don't particularly have time. We're looking at that now with people who will not pull together and put on a mask and stay at home unless you have to go out and make your bread and buy your salmon. We're looking at people who literally cannot discipline themselves to stay at home for the sake of millions of other human beings.
Well, Jamal, do we have any more questions?
We do.
Okay.
This is from Socorro. Hey, cousin.
Hey, cool.
You feel there is a distraction that can happen by separating Black trans lives and overall Black lives? Why the separate marches?
We actually, I don't think that distinction means that there's weakness. I think that sometimes things have to be just like Black Lives Matter.
Distraction is the word.
Oh, right. I don't think it's a distraction. I think that it's important to exalt those who are the least of these, who are being hurt the most. So we say Black Lives Matter, not all lives matter, because we want to make sure that we understand that Black people are more at risk. We do a trans march for trans people because we want to make sure that we understand that trans people are more at risk than the rest of the LGBTQIA community.
Trans women specifically.
Trans women specifically are the most at risk, but trans people overall, but trans women specifically, because trans men get to participate in patriarchy if they are able to be passive.
And I want to say that, right, that also part of it is, in a broader way, this is that, as Brian likes to say, in this pandemical time.
That's Darrell's term, not mine. Darrell made that
term. Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't remember which one of y'all came up with these pandemical times. What's happening? What I find is happening is that everybody who was sick and tired is really, 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 really at the apex of sick and tired. And so all of the isms, all of the ills, all of the oppression, all of the bigotry, all of the this is what happened, all of that is coming out right now. And people are in their houses. Some people are not in their houses. And they're going, not, no, mo. And so,
right.
So part of it is you know, if we're not letting anybody off the hook, then everybody that has been affected by that hook is coming out right now, and they're coming out in spades. So that's part of the other reason that I think, and to answer your question, part of the other reason why the trans march, why the Black trans march, because and we talked a little bit about this in the last episode on intersectionality, but we talked about how there is a difference between the treatment of Black LGBTQIA folks and white LGBTQIA. There's marginalization within a marginalized community. That is absolutely possible. And so having a trans march shines the spotlight on that reality. Now, the degree to which people understand what I just said about that truth, you know, that marginalization within a marginalized community is happening. I mean, we'll get there, but we don't get there at all unless we are able to acknowledge, no, this is a population in peril.
And what's go Darrell.
And for me, the necessity is to make sure that the space is safe. So if we have to separate those two groups for the sake of making sure that everyone is safe, then that is something that we should do. A lot of people do not know that two of the women that started Black Lives Matter, Patrice Concolas and Alicia Garza, identify as queer.
Right.
People, and I'll stand corrected if that isn't correct, but as I have read articles or heard them talk, or if they're not, they are specifically well understood and empathetic and sympathetic to the plight of LGBTQIA plus people, but specifically, again, the people who suffer the most under the theory of intersectionality, and that is Black trans women. Literally no one cares. When I was marching Sunday and that heat was barreling down on my forehead and the back of my neck, I was looking at tens of thousands of people, and the majority of them were white, that were marching for Black trans lives.
Well, what's interesting about Darrell is that, you know, I not to disparage anybody who's asking questions, but I think it's really important to see that we make those distinctions when we find people to be worthy, right? We do Black men's marches at the drop of a dime. We mostly talk about, up until now, the disparity of the Black community vis-a-vis the Black man. We talk about how the Black man has been torn down. We talk about how the Black man has been arrested. And all of that is true. But Black women matter too. Mm-hmm. And Black trans women matter too. And Black LGBTQIA people. And the space, the air is never given to those people because we believe in patriarchy. And we have been taught that our overcoming and our liberation is, I can't hear you there. You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Oh, am I on mute? Sorry, the food just came, so I didn't want to, make you guys all suffer that. But anyway, no, I was just saying that also comes from white supremacy too. Our specific version of patriarchy comes directly from what we were taught.
Well, and that's the thing. All of this goes back to the beginning question about redefining our ideas of success. So our success may not look like this. It may look like this. It may look like a circle. It may look like an interweaving connection. It may not look like a person at the top leading everybody down the street. And which goes back to Darrell's point of why we have to understand and contextualize history properly, because not one leader was the only person who thought like them or spoke like them in that group. They were chosen for reasons, but they came out of a circle of, if you hear Dr. King talk, he'll talk about a lot of people that were as well-versed, as educated, as well-spoken, but oftentimes those people don't get there if they're gay or trans or lesbian or not the right look for the right moment. And if we let things go, perhaps we can all liberate from multiple sides and attack a problem from multiple sides.
And one night I spent over an hour educating a friend of mine, Black, lesbian. She could not understand why people were saying, if you don't support Black LGBTQIA plus people, you're not supporting Black Lives Matter. And some people were saying, do not march with them if they do not support all Black people. And she was under the assumption that people were saying, no, we not down with Black Lives Matter, yada yada, because I'm gay. And she thought that I had to contextualize and help her understand what it meant. I am Black first in the eye of society and oppression. Like you say all the time, Brian, we are all these things at the same time. But when you break the threshold of your door, you have to understand how you're seen by the different parts of the world.
And the truth of the matter is, Ayanna Dior was beat up in a bodega in Minneapolis by Black people.
Yeah. Wasn't a white person around, wasn't a policeman around, none of them. Yeah.
So, and the truth of the matter is, everybody right now is telling the truth. So the truth is, that is what's happening. Jamal, what's our next question?
I don't see one actually. Yeah. Actually, I was gonna say to your point, Brian, though, about sort of Black men being held up. The Juneteenth recently, for the week of Juneteenth, for actual Juneteenth, I did a rally. I was standing in for Tiffany Ray Fisher, the artistic director of Alyssa Monte dance company here in New York, and she wasn't able to be there. And so I was basically her proxy. I gave her words and I gave mine, but when that was being planned, the way that she got involved in a previous rally was that it was going to be for a moment a Black male march, Black man march of sorts, to deal with George Floyd and all of the other Black people who have been killed by police. I say Black people.
Breonna Taylor?
Well, that was exactly the part of the conversation, is that the person running for Congress who was participated in that conversation said, you can't do this and not have a Black woman involved in something that looks like leadership, even though this was a group that elected not to identify a leader per se, because this was a different approach altogether. Still, the idea is there has to be someone at that microphone with a vulva. It does not work. They cannot say Breonna Taylor's name and then not have a woman involved. And
or somebody that identifies as a woman.
Someone that identifies, right. Yeah. Right. But the idea is that conversation was happening that happened just this past month. You know what I mean? In other words, this hasn't gone away, to your point about sort of upholding or exalting Black manhood in these contexts.
Well, and we do it all the time. And because we're triggered to do that, we think that and women often take, I mean, it's a whole nother show, but women often take a back seat to what it is that Black men need, as gay people take a back seat to what it is, because that's imitating the system that we're taught about. And until we unpack and redefine that, we're going to continue to run around in a circle. And to your point, Jamal, we won't be able to change anything because we'll inevitably be recreating it. So I think in conclusion, I think that we've kind of unpacked all that. I think the idea is that we want real change. The symbols need to be representative of the internal change. Your skin needs to clear because you're eating well, not because you shaved off the zits.
Not because you got the best products. And you put them on.
Right. The products come after the diet. Right?
The money has to be where the mouth is. I grew up all the time. Old folks say, put your money where your mouth is. We have to see some fruit. We have to see some type of action. Looking, if I can refer to the scripture where Jesus saw the fig tree and it was just leaves. Mm-hmm. There were no figs. He cursed the tree, and in a matter of moments, all of the leaves had fallen off. That is the story. Where is the fruit? Can I be fed at the tree? Can I grow? Can I expand? Can I have a better life? Can you help me with some of this PTSD that I'm living through as these fireworks are going off every night between 11 a.m. and 2 a.m. in my neighborhood? Starbucks, whoever, if y'all gonna pour this money off of Zuckerberg's Facebook and stuff like that, where is that pool of money sitting? Who is running your numbers at the office? Can somebody say, hey, so that 90 million is dangling around that we're probably not going to spend in the coming year. Let's do some good with it.
Well, and absolutely. And I think the bottom line is everything is, this is the long haul. So just for any corporations that may watch or listen, we're all like this. Okay.
Right.
Okay, great. You took Aunt Jemima down. Okay. How many Black people how many brown people? How many Asian people? How many people that are not exactly like you? And we understand that the world, that the country has white people in it. The expectation, for me at least, is not that white people don't have places in the world and don't speak and aren't in leadership. The point is that if you see only people that look like you around, right? If you see only people that look like you around all the time, everywhere you go, then maybe we should shift that. Maybe we should do that. And to that end, I want to say, next couple of shows, we're going to be talking about arts and activism. And we'll have a couple of guests. Now, there's a lot going on in our community.
Oh, God.
And we're going to unpack some of it. Not all of it, but we're going to unpack some of it. And we're going to talk, you have 3 artists here. We're going to bring some women artists that are friends of ours that are come and discuss our practice of being artists our whole lives and being in activism and in action for the betterment of our communities our whole lives. So we're going to talk about that next time.
I'm very nervous.
Don't be nervous.
I'm not.
Bye, everybody.
That's why.
Bye. Love, love, love. Yeah.